I remember so well this conversation in our kitchen. My dad is standing, I am standing, and he asked me, okay, are you informing me, or you are a kind of asking for a permission to go and study abroad? I remember me looking into his eyes and saying, no, I am not asking for permission. I am informing you. I got accepted, and I would do whatever is possible to make it a reality, to make my way to Germany.
After leaving, everything is possible. The question is, how does this everything actually look like? This is what we're exploring in this podcast. Off they go. Stories of starting over abroad. I'm Janina. Let's dive into today's episode, shall we? Hello, Syuzanna. Welcome to Off They Go. I am so thrilled to have you here. I am excited and can't wait to dive into your story. We met about 1.5 years ago in Armenia because you've been my lovely tour guide when I was discovering your beautiful home country.
Good afternoon, Janina, and yes, thank you so much for having me here. As I mentioned before, thanks to that trip with which you came to Armenia and which also brought you into my life. So I'm happy that we have established this kind of beautiful, safe friendship, and today I feel safe and comfortable enough to be your guest. Thank you very much for inviting me.
So where shall we begin? Maybe you can share a bit about, because you live in Berlin right now, right? And you grew up in Armenia. How did you manage and how did you take this courage to move from Armenia in your 20s, move all by yourself from Armenia to Berlin, no scholarship, no family system, no support. You just did this all by yourself. Like, I still can't believe this. When I think back of what I did, like how I was when I was that age, I'm so impressed how you managed all of that. So maybe we can start there.
Yeah, now when I hear this question and when I also look back, I feel a kind of surprised myself as well that young Syuzanna, who spent most of her life in Armenia, who grew up in a small village in Armenia, that Syuzanna who was living with her parents, and she didn't have any experience of living independently. Of course, back then as a student, I was earning some money in Armenia, but I knew that I live with my parents. If I don't manage financially, they are there, and I don't pay, for example, rent, etc. Therefore, now every time I look back, I feel surprised myself, and I feel very glad that at this phase of my life, I have learned to say, I feel proud of myself. I feel proud of that younger Syuzanna who made that decision. And I feel proud of current Syuzanna, the person I have become, because it has been a very, very long journey. I think so. It was 2014. So I was 24 years old. I was doing my master's degree in Armenia. I was looking around, and I would ask myself a question. Okay, now we got education. The next step is getting a full-time job, and another logical step for a typical Armenian girl was getting married. And I come from the most traditional society region of Armenia. Um, so which means there are lots of traditions you are supposed to follow. And for example, when a woman gets married, most of them live with their parents-in-law. And I would look around and then I would ask myself a question. Okay, that's it. This is the story of your life, getting married, having children, and a kind of obeying your husband and your parents-in-law. Of course, nowadays many things has changed, and luckily to better for many girls and women in Armenia. But back then, it was so typical that um, the society perceived a girl, a woman, as a property. Before getting married, you belonged to your family, to your father, brother, and then once you get married, you belong to your husband and to the family of your husband. And it comes with lots of unwritten rules, traditions, and all those traditions and rules put a woman in a kind of obeying position. You have to obey to your husband, parents-in-law, without asking questions. Because if you ask a question, it's quite often interpreted as a sign of disrespect towards those people. And I would look around and I would always think, no, this is not the life I would like to live. There is so much to explore. There is so much to see. And I am so, so thankful that back then I found one non-governmental organization in my city, and I started working as a volunteer at that organization. That organization was, so to say, my first window of interaction with people from other cultures, mostly from Europe. And it was also a space where I could look what are the opportunities for me in terms of maybe studying or traveling. And back then I had this small goal. I would say, if I at least managed to get to Europe at least once, I would be so happy. Then I have seen a little bit of this world. And I remember that the first time when I traveled to Europe, and the topic was women empowerment, it was 2013. It was to Lithuania. And after that trip, but I would like to live on my own for a certain period of time. And as I said, I started working for that organization as a volunteer, different social projects. And back then I was feeling also this hunger, this drive to study further. It was the point when I started applying for international projects. Back then there was a program very popular, European Voluntary Service. So I applied to a few projects. I got positive answers from Greece and from Germany, but I decided Germany because I was thinking, okay, I would like to study further, and for me, Germany was one of the countries with best educational system. I had an interest towards German language. I wanted to learn German, and I thought that, well, Germany is more a kind of Central Europe. If I come to Germany, I would have more opportunities to travel. Actually, my way to Europe was this European Voluntary Service Program. I used my time during this program to study German as much as possible. And it was during winter period, very cold. We know how gloomy Germany can be during winter. So really cold, really gray. And the first time ever that I moved abroad, living on my own, new culture, even in everyday life, there were many things which were at the beginning, they were a challenge for me, such as, for example, figuring out using Straßenbahn, S-Bahn, or underground. All of that seemed very complicated to me because in my city, we just had those small buses, Marschrutkas, and it was a bit challenging for me to figure out my everyday life. And then once in Germany, in Leipzig, you had a choice between Greece and Germany. And I remember in Greece, the project was on a very beautiful island. A friend of mine went to do that project, and she was posting sunny pictures at the beach. And I'm in Leipzig, rainy, cold, gray. You didn't come to Germany just, for the sake of the country. You came here because you also thought that this country could give you a good educational opportunity. So I started looking which kind of programs the University of Leipzig has for foreigners. And yeah, I found a program which was fitting my interests, my educational background. I submitted my documents and I came back to Armenia. I didn't say anything to my parents. I didn't share a word because I thought, yeah, I would wait until I have a reply from the university. I think around 7 months later, I came back to Germany, but as a student. And coming back to Germany was a long way. Yeah.
Wow. I'm curious, how did your parents, how did your family react to the news, the big news?
Mm. Um, yes, the reaction wasn't what I would have liked to receive, because it's thanks to my mother that I received my first education in Armenia. She would always tell me, Syuzanna, you need to study, because back then also it was so typical, especially for small villages, that girls after leaving school they would get married. And those who would get an opportunity to go to a university while being a student and getting married meant that afterwards it was her husband who was deciding whether she was allowed to continue her education or not. And if she already received an education, again, it was her husband who had the right to decide whether she was allowed to work or not. Therefore, many families, especially such families who do agricultural work to earn money, to provide living, um, which means like they were earning that money really in a challenging way. And many parents would think, okay, anyway, my daughter is going to get married and it's her husband who is going to decide whether she's allowed to study further or work. And many families therefore would say, yeah, she just leaves school, that's it. Then she gets married. And it's thanks to my mom that I didn't follow this path. She was, since childhood, she was a kind of rooting this idea in me that I am going to go to a university before getting married. First of all, I need to study and I need to earn my own money. And despite that it was my mom, she was also the first person who was actually against the idea coming to Germany to study. I have a full understanding for it because my mom, she spent most of her life in Armenia, and she has had a very restrictive life. I assume whatever she knew about Europe, like, was from television, from movies. And I think another reason why she was against was the fact that they knew I didn't get a scholarship and they knew they wouldn't be able to support me financially. Therefore, I think this fear was another reason why she wasn't supportive. My dad, he didn't speak much. I remember very much, I remember so well this conversation in our kitchen. My dad is standing, I am standing, and like, first of all, I told my mom that I got accepted to a university, and then it was the day when I was sharing the news with my dad. And I think at the end, like, now he asked me, okay, are you informing me or you are a kind of asking for a permission to go and study abroad? I remember me looking into his eyes and saying, no, I am not asking for permission. I am informing you. I got accepted and I would do whatever is possible to make it a reality, to make my way to Germany. Uh, I don't know where I took that courage. Um, I cannot really now, when I look back, 23 years old Syuzanna, 24 years old Syuzanna, uh, who was living her life according to those like traditions, rules. As a girl, you are also a kind of supposed to have the same opinion as your parents, especially your dad. If you have another opinion, or if you are telling them, I want to do things on my own, it's quite often perceived as an act of disrespect towards your parents. Therefore, when I look back, I don't know where I took that courage to say those words to my father, looking into his eyes. But I assume it was the moment when I realized it's either now or never. This was the opportunity I was kind of desperately trying to hang on, to grasp, not to miss. And actually, how many? 12 years have passed since. And I can say with confidence, it has been the best decision in my life, because it hasn't only changed my life. Now, looking at my parents, looking at my nephew, at my niece, I have become an aunt, and proud aunt during these years. I see how much the fact of having me abroad and the person I have become, how much it has also influenced their mindset and a little bit changed their lifestyle. Therefore, the impact is much bigger than for me.
Wow. This is so touching. How did your father react when you answered in this clarity of, I'm not asking for permission?
I don't remember anymore the exact words, but I remember that my mom, like, she didn't speak to me for a few days. And it was my dad who was like walking around asking, hey, because I had to collect a number of documents. He would drive me to those institutions, and he would ask me, once there was a problem, I couldn't get one document. It was about that I don't have any criminal record in Armenia. And he saw how upset I was that I couldn't get the document that day. And I could see like that he was a kind of also worried. He wanted to be supportive. Hey, don't worry, we will come another day. So actually he was supportive. Like he was, yes, I don't remember the exact words. I think he also didn't say much, but with his silent actions, he was showing his support.
You're still so young and you decided to change everything and step into a life that nobody of your family ever lived or knows anything about.
I think another reason why I was feeling a little bit confident was the fact that I was in Leipzig like 7 months before. As I said, I went to Leipzig for this European voluntary service. And I was thinking, well, I speak German a little bit. I had some basic knowledge of German back then. And I was thinking I would do any kind of job to earn money. The challenge for me was that mm, I didn't I didn't only have to earn money to cover my monthly expenses, but the program was a paid one. I had to earn enough money to pay the tuition fee, mm, which was challenging because as a student in Germany, as a master's student, you are allowed to work 20 hours, and that work was perfectly enough to cover my monthly expenses. And it was only during holidays where there were no restrictions. I could work as much as it was possible as I could work. And during holidays, during the first winter holidays, I worked 3 weeks nonstop with minimum sleep, physical work. I was working as a waitress, as a hostess. And after 3 weeks, I spent 1 week in bed. I couldn't physically move because it was during Christmas, New Year period. I was working at restaurants with lots of people at bigger events, which means moving all the time, heavy trays. I couldn't move my hands and my legs. They hurt very much because I was walking all the time. And those 3 weeks, I think I think I slept like 3 hours a day, and then my body just collapsed. And I remember one day, so in the evenings I was working like at different places, and during mornings I was working in hotels as breakfast waitress. And I remember it was in Leipzig. I also remember that hotel. Uh, I asked for a short break. I went to the toilet and I cried because I couldn't walk anymore. My feet was hurting. I remember washing my feet with cold water so that it smoothens the pain a little bit. I cried. I washed myself and I went to work further. But back then, what was giving me strength was the realization that I am doing this to get to a certain point, and this is not the life I will have forever. This is just a kind of phase in my life to get to something better. This is a way to get to my destination. Therefore, it was giving so much strength. And another thing which was which was giving me strength was the idea that because not many people believed in me. Now I hear from so many people that, well, they believed in me, I could make it. Maybe they did, but I didn't have this verbal, this psychological support. Even my relatives, they were, "Oh, are you crazy? Like, you are moving to Germany to study without money, without scholarship. Did you really think of it properly?" And I had one professor, I am very thankful to her. She would always repeat, "Syuzanna, I believe in you. You should go for it." And there was another person, my aunt. I am also very, very thankful to my aunt, because it doesn't matter how hardworking I was, it doesn't matter how motivated I was, because back then, to get a visa to come to Germany as a student, if you don't have a scholarship or you don't have a confirmation, your parents are going to support you financially, then you need to show that you have a blocked amount. Back then it was 8,000 euro. And so that you understand what a huge amount it was for Armenians, especially in my city. You could buy a one-room flat with that money in my city, 8,000 euro. It was a huge amount. And it was my aunt who collected that money for me. She didn't have that money, but she collected it from her colleagues, from people she knew. So I always repeat, and yes, in my journey, like the life I have achieved, the person I have become, it's also thanks to my aunt. If not her, as I said, just technically, I couldn't get visa to come to Germany. Thanks to her support, I am where I am now. Yeah.
It shows such a beautiful thing that it's like there might be something that we know that we want or we feel called to do. And there are people, situations that make it hard. And there are also sometimes these tiny little support sparks that are so, so valuable.
Yeah. And actually, like on my path, I met so many kind people. I had a grandpa waiter with me. I was like his grandchild. He adopted me in a way that back then I was so afraid of German numbers. I would always ask him, "Hey, could you please," whenever it was time that the guests were paying, I would ask him to get money, because I was afraid that I would like confuse the numbers. I would do the wrong calculation. And he was always there to support me. And also with my tuition fee, coordinators knew about my situation, and they always gave me another deadline to pay the tuition fee. Therefore, I also like strongly believe that when there is something you want with all of your heart, and if you are a good, honest person, the universe supports you to get those things. You always meet people this or that way who support you on your journey.
Mm, I agree. So you talked about many beautiful things that supported you when you arrived in Germany. And you also said that your family, your parents had a picture of how Europe is like. Now I'm curious, how was it for you when you arrived here? Were there things that were super surprising? And how did you manage to integrate all this, like this completely new culture?
In terms of cultural shock, I wouldn't say that I experienced a huge cultural shock, but I think one of the reasons for it was the fact that I didn't have time. For around 2.5 years, I didn't know what it means to have a few hours free or to have a whole free day. My life was university, library, and work. I never had time to go out with my course mates, or I just remember back then I was, oh, I wish I had time just, to come to library and just spend all my free time studying here. It was a dream for me, just, having all the free time, enough time to study. But I experienced some shock in the educational system in a positive way because back then there was also lots of corruption in the educational system in Armenia. And there was a huge hierarchy in the educational system. Um, I assume it was also inherited from the Soviet times. So if you were a student, you were here, and the professor is here. Um, and we weren't allowed to have our own opinion. I don't remember that we had discussions during our studies. It was mainly the professor dictating something, we were taking notes, and then for exams, we were supposed just to reproduce what the professor shared with us. No critical questions, no thinking. And I remember so well when a professor, it was about conflict studies, a professor who like who has dozens of books published, who is giving lectures at really top universities. He asked for my opinion and he would say, well, there is not such a thing as a wrong opinion. Every opinion is welcome, but your opinion has a value if you can support your opinion with arguments, right? Which is very logical. I was so shocked. I was, oh my God, but I am such a small person. I'm just a student here. He's a professor and he is asking me about my opinion. And he also says there is not such a thing as a wrong opinion. That came as a shock for me. One of the biggest challenges I had was to learn to have my own opinion, both personal and also in the educational field, and afterwards also in professional life. This is something which back then, I all the time say back then, because over this decade, like 12 years, many things have changed in Armenia. There's lots of development. But again, back then, if you were born as a girl in your family, you shouldn't have an opinion. You are not asked what you want, what you like. Um, it's kindergarten, it's school, it's your parents, it's your husband, it's parents of your husband who are going to decide for you. Therefore, I struggled so much to have an opinion on things, both in my personal life and in the educational field. It took me really lots of efforts to also develop critical thinking. Because again, in my culture, what you were told by your teachers, by your parents, you were supposed to accept it as the universal truth. Therefore, it was like one of the most challenging, but of course, one of the most important learnings in my life.
And how is it when you go back to Armenia these days and you come with opinions and with other perspectives? How does this play out?
Yes, as I said, many things have changed since towards better. So now having your own personal opinion is not regarded as something bad, but I believe again in smaller villages where the community is more closed. I think people still think otherwise. But at the beginning, I mentioned that my journey hasn't only changed my life, but it also has impacted the life, the mindset of my parents. And now, like, whenever I go back home, I would just, throw a very controversial question in the kitchen around the table. And then I would start talking about that topic and asking my parents their opinion. And my mom, she would always, whenever she sees something published on internet, she would come to me and she would say, Syuzanna, look, I have read about this news. Can you please tell me, is this a reliable source? Do you think this is true? So my parents, they also have become a kind of more aware which information they read, which kind of source that information has. And I also see now they are helping my brother and my sister-in-law to raise their children. And I also see how different they are. Yes, how different they are with their grandchildren.
What I can say is that I love see you with your nephews or your niece and your nephew,
Yeah.
and it always lights me up to see you spending this quality time with loved ones that are so far away, which is, I mean, which is definitely a tougher part of following this journey of moving abroad, right?
Yeah. That's why this is also one of the reasons I also came up with this with this idea to organize different trips to Armenia. Now, back then, when I graduated from the university, I had a list of organizations where I would have liked to work, and one of the criteria was that that organization should be working with Armenia or should at least have interest to work with Armenia. And thankfully, my professional life has always been related to Armenia, somehow connected with Armenia, giving me opportunities to travel more often to Armenia, to see my family more often. And then after Corona, I spent a bit more time in Armenia. I discovered hiking for me. And I was active on social media. And then my international friends started writing me, asking about Armenia, or saying that, wow, Syuzanna, we didn't know like about Armenian history, or we didn't know Armenia has such a beautiful nature. You made us curious. Now we would like to spend holidays in Armenia. Maybe you could support us to organize a trip. And then I was, well, maybe I could offer this kind of trips. Why not? This was the way I came up with this idea. And now organizing and accompanying the study visits, hiking trips to Armenia, of course, gives me another opportunity to travel to Armenia more often and spend more time with my nephew and niece. And I try to spend quality time with them. Even whenever I go to get some presents for them, I am okay. A present should have a purpose. It should have first of all an educational purpose. So I would always try to get some presents which would make them think, would develop their critical thinking since childhood, and not when they are 20 years old. And they learn having a personal opinion is okay, and it's actually a very necessary skill to survive in this life. Yes, because growing up, um, back then, like it was after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the beginning of 1990s. It was the first Nagorno-Karabakh war, and there was also a very strong earthquake in my region. And therefore, people were struggling very much. They didn't have. My mom, she tells me that we used to live in a kind of container with no heating, no hot water. And afterwards as well, we got a kind of normal house. But for example, we didn't have heating, we didn't have hot water. During summer, we didn't have cold water as well. I and my brother had the task to carry water from another part of the village to our house. What I am trying to say that I understand back then, um, like the biggest goal was to survive. The biggest goal was to feed your children. If your children were not hungry, then everything was fine. And people didn't have resources, and the mindset was different. Therefore, people weren't paying much attention whether a child, for example, develops a critical thinking since childhood, right? But now times have changed. People are more aware of things. People are more educated. And as an aunt who loves her nephew and niece very, very much, I am trying to have my little contribution in bringing the world closer to them, preparing them for this very beautiful and very challenging world.
Mhm. Do you still have like friendships from back when you lived in Armenia that saw you grow and change, and but there's still this connection?
Hmm. I have some connections with my course mates, not really since childhood. I don't have connection, for example, with my schoolmates. I see some of them on social media, but married with children, their life is completely different than mine. We don't really have contact with each other. And I think we are also so different. I think I would have liked to see them, to meet them one day, but as I said, we don't really have contact. And with some of my course mates, I still have contact. And actually, as the last years, I have been traveling to Armenia often and spending more time in Armenia. I also reached out to some of them. We reconnected, and these are wonderful people. Mostly female friends, female course mates who are also married, but they have a job, they work, they have 2, 3 children. And actually, I admire them because they have different social roles. They are a wife, they have a role of a wife, a mother, and they have a job, and they manage all of that. And I really admire them. And yes, I'm trying to keep that connection with some people. Yeah. And I
Mm.
also receive lots of support from them, lots of empowerment from them that they have been following my path. And especially recently, I have become a little bit more active on social media, trying to use my small platform to empower, to encourage other women. Um, because I also hear very beautiful stories from people. For example, one of my relatives, she's a teacher in a village school where I grew up. And whenever I visit them, when I'm in Armenia, she would tell me, Syuzanna, this pupil, she approached me and she said, like, yes, she's trying to study as well as it's possible. And she's learning foreign languages because she knows that her relative, whose name is Syuzanna, she moved to Europe, she studied in Germany, and now she's traveling the world. So she would like to travel the world as Syuzanna. And it's a very beautiful thing to hear about this. And it also comes with a little bit, actually not a little bit, but for me, it comes with lots of responsibility to know that I have no idea who that child is, who that like 13, 14 years old child is. I also don't remember people from my childhood, as I didn't have much contact with them over the past 2 decades. And there is someone in the village who believes that if she studies well, or if she studies a foreign language, one day she can make it to Europe, she can travel the world as Syuzanna. This is really such an encouraging and empowering message for myself. Therefore, now I'm getting a little bit more active on social media, trying to show other wonderful women that if I could, they can also.
I remember feeling the shift in your social media activity. And I remember that maybe a year ago, maybe 1.5, it felt like you went through a tougher time. I remember you had to leave your flat, but you couldn't find a new one. And I remember, wow, there was so much going on in your life that felt tough. And then some months ago, it felt as if you got your spark back.
Mhm. Yeah, this is a very long story, because the journey of getting my spark back is also a long one. I also disappeared from social media for some time. Um, so the person I have become now, I'm trying to find the proper words to say it, because this part of my personality, it has always been within me. Yeah, it existed. I just use this metaphor. I find this metaphor a beautiful one, because there has also been lots of physical transformation. And I say that this physical transformation is just this visible outcome of internal transformation. And internal transformation, it started with Syuzanna in Armenia, who made this decision to come to study in Germany. And yes, there was such a period in my time which was a very difficult one. Let's name it a crisis. I was in a kind of crisis for a few years. Um, and I think one of the reasons why I found myself in that situation was the fact that I wasn't at peace with my own self. Um, I didn't accept the person I was, and maybe I also didn't really love the person I was. I know all the reasons why. Um, they say it has become now trendy to put things, on childhood, to say childhood trauma, etc. But this is also partly true for me, and and many things which I had to unlearn, which took lots of efforts, lots of courage, and lots of reflection, lots of work to unlearn. They were formed by my parents, by the society, by the culture I grew up. Yeah. I all the time say unwritten rules, traditions. There are so many still, so many rules and traditions. What a girl, a woman is supposed to do, how she's supposed to live her life. And though I moved to Germany like 12 years ago, and I was so far away from that culture, from those traditions, rules, from people who expected me to follow those rules and traditions, but my parents and the society, they did such a great job because they rooted all of that so deeply in my mind, in my heart. I was living my life according to those false, I would call them false values. Um, and at certain period of my life, slowly I started realizing that I would like to change my life. And there are lots of things which I need to unlearn, which were making my life really very difficult as a woman. Um, so, as I said, the person, like this huge smile you see on my face, this is a result of a um, very hard work and also therapy. Um, Therefore, I'm also very thankful to my female friends who have been a part of this transformation, who have been really very supportive, who have been empowering me, because years long I was forcing myself to be a person I am not. And even like uh, my hair, this is my natural hair. And it has been half a year that I wear my natural hair. Around how many years? Around 15 years. Every single day I was straightening them. And now I'm like, why, Syuzanna? Why would you do it? And again, this is such a beautiful metaphor. Like I was forcing my hair to be straight. And it's much deeper. Like I was forcing myself to be a person I wasn't. And as now I am on the journey, on the path, getting back to real me, um, you also see like this physical transformation is also a part of this internal transformation. Just accepting myself the way I am, accepting my curly hair. I also, since a month, I decided I am also letting my eyebrows grow because naturally I have very thick eyebrows, and for 2 decades I was removing them, and then this another realization came to me that Syuzanna, actually your eyebrows are very beautiful the way they are naturally, and then I decided to let them grow as well. So letting my hair be the way it is, letting my eyebrows grow, I think this is another demonstration that I have finally arrived at the point in my life when I am really at peace with the way I am, with the personality I am. I am embracing every piece of it, and I am very much welcoming it. I see it now as a strength, not as something which I need to hide or need to change. And this realization and acceptance, it has made my life so much easier. My mindset, my heart. I feel also yeah, light. Maybe light would be the proper word. I feel also very light. I feel for the first time in my life, I feel at peace and in harmony with myself. Mm.
This
And
is so
I am,
beautiful.
yeah, and I am so sometimes, I would feel emotional, and I would think, wow, it took me so much time, and it took me such a it was a painful experience because I was also in a very unhappy relationship. I also perfectly know why I ended up there because, as I said, I didn't really love myself. I didn't really love myself. But anyway, um, I feel very grateful that I could discover I could discover all of this at this period of my life, and I could arrive at the point when, as I said, I am at peace with the person I am, because I know so many wonderful women who spent all their lives just oppressed, following those traditions, following those rules, and never really having this opportunity to let themselves be the way they are and to thrive. Um, Therefore, I embrace all of this with lots of gratitude.
So how did you end up there? Is there something that you would share with your past self? Or would there be something that you would have liked to hear earlier?
I think, well, it's difficult for me whether like to say whether now I have a message for younger Syuzanna, because I have a message for younger Syuzanna, but I have message because I have become this confident woman who likes herself, who welcomes her personality. But I had to go through all that long journey. I had to go through that crisis to unlearn many things, to allow my real self come out, and to learn to accept and appreciate myself the way I am. I had to go through that path. I believe also it's very, very important that um, that women, if they, I know now I also speak from a privileged position, because not everyone can afford to do a professional therapy, but professional therapy can be really very important, especially for those women who grow up in oppressive cultures with lots of pressure on them, with lots of expectations on them, and especially if they are such a good student like me, who like take all those like who take all everything they are told without questioning, just believing that's the universal truth. Then the work to unlearn those patterns, to unlearn those things, it will be really very challenging and very difficult. When you have a professional support, it helps you to connect things. I also, for example, started remembering so many things from my childhood. And then I would say, but why? When you do this, when you have a professional support, that you realize why your mind and your body, they start remembering things which happened to you when you were a child. I also like this metaphor. I see it quite often on social media when a grandma is passing a dirty laundry to her daughter. Like that grandma is getting that dirty laundry from her mom, and then she's passing that laundry to her daughter, and the daughter takes, and she doesn't pass it to her daughter. She starts a kind of figuring out. She's opening, trying to figure out what is inside, cleaning it, and I consider myself. It started with my mom, of course. It started with my mom, and then it continued with me. Let's put it this way, that maybe my mom and me, we are the first women in our generational line, in our family line, who got the courage and who got an opportunity to undo that dirty laundry, not to pass it to a further generation, to break generational patterns, to work on ourselves. I'm the first woman in my family line who got higher education, who did a professional therapy. Therefore, I am very much hopeful that next generations in our family line, women, female generations, that they would have better lives than us, because at least they wouldn't have to do the work of this dirty laundry.
Thank you so much, Susanna, for inspiring, for showing yourself, for showing this journey, for sharing here, but also on your Instagram. And it's it's touching, and I'm very grateful that our paths crossed. and that you took this big step, and who knows where your life will take you next? Who knows all the magic that's still coming for you? This is still just the beginning, and I'm excited to see where life is taking you.
Thank you very much, Janina, for having me here today. Yes, thank you very much for giving me space for my little voice. And I hope very much that it can be a kind of maybe a little bit of inspiration for other women with similar cultures that if Syuzanna, who grew up in a small village in Armenia, if she could make her way out to Germany with no financial support, with little knowledge of German, if she could make it possible, then they can also make it possible.